Park J never wanted to be important. He was a translator, nothing more. He spoke 12 languages, including 3 alien ones, and his job was simple. He listened, he translated, and he stayed invisible. That was how he liked it. But the universe had other plans for him. The diplomatic ship carrying Earth's official ambassador to Valora Prime was 3 days away from arrival when Ambassador Choi became terribly sick. The doctors said it was a rare infection, something he caught from contaminated food on the last station. He would live, but he could not work. He could barely stand. Captain Yoon called a meeting in the ship's small conference room. Jay sat in the corner, expecting to hear that they would turn back. Instead, the captain looked directly at him. "Lieutenant Park, you are now our ambassador." Jay almost laughed. He thought it was a joke, but no one was smiling. "Sir, I am just a translator," Jay said. "I have no training in diplomacy. I do not know the proper rituals. I will embarrass Earth." "You know their language better than anyone else on this ship," Captain Yoon replied. "You have studied their culture for 6 years. You are the only choice we have." And so, Park J became the first human to officially represent Earth before the Valoran Empire. The Valorans were not like humans. They had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Their civilization was ancient when humanity was still living in caves. They stood tall, over 2 meters on average, with silver blue skin that seemed to glow faintly from within. Their eyes held no pupils, just swirling light, like captured stars. They moved with perfect grace, spoke with perfect calm, and regarded younger species with something between curiosity and pity. To them, humans were children. Interesting children, perhaps, but children nonetheless. Jay's shuttle landed on Valora Prime at sunset. The sky burned in shades of purple and gold, and the capital city stretched before him like a dream made of crystal. Towers of glass and light rose toward the heavens, connected by bridges that looked too thin to hold any weight. Everything was beautiful. Everything was cold. A group of Valoran guards waited at the landing pad. They wore white armor and carried weapons that hummed with quiet energy. Their faces showed nothing as Jay stepped off the shuttle. "I am Lieutenant Park J of Earth," he said in their language, bowing deeply. "I come in peace and friendship." The guards did not respond. They simply turned and began walking, expecting him to follow. Jay followed. The walk to the palace took almost an hour. Jay's legs ached, but he did not complain. He kept his head high and his steps steady, even when passing Valorans stopped to stare at him like he was an animal in a zoo. The palace was the largest structure Jay had ever seen. It rose from the center of the city like a frozen waterfall, all white stone and gleaming metal. Inside, the halls were silent. Servants moved without making a sound. Even the air felt still, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Jay was brought to a great chamber, where dozens of Valoran nobles waited. They sat on floating chairs arranged in a half circle, their glowing eyes fixed upon him. At the center sat Emperor Velkaran, an ancient being whose silver skin had turned almost white with age. His face was like carved stone, neither welcoming nor hostile. He simply watched. "The human ambassador," one of the nobles announced, "come to beg for trade agreements." Jay bowed again. "I come to discuss friendship between our peoples," he said. "Not to beg." A soft murmur passed through the crowd. Some seemed amused. Others seemed offended. Emperor Velkaran raised one long-fingered hand, and silence returned instantly. "We will see," he said. His voice was deep and slow, like the movement of glaciers. "You will stay in our palace. You will learn our ways, and we will decide if your kind is worth our attention." It was not the welcome Jay had hoped for, but it was not a rejection either. He bowed once more and said, "I am grateful for your hospitality." As he straightened, his eyes caught movement near the edge of the chamber. A young Valoran woman stood apart from the others, watching him with an expression he could not read. She was tall like all her kind, with silver blue skin and hair that fell like liquid moonlight past her shoulders. But there was something different about her eyes. They held a light that seemed sharper, more curious than the cold stares of the others. "My daughter will attend to you," the emperor said. "Princess Lyra will ensure you do not wander where you should not." The princess stepped forward. She did not bow to Jay. She barely acknowledged him. "Follow me, human," she said simply. Jay followed her out of the great chamber and through a maze of corridors. She walked fast and he had to nearly jog to keep up. She did not look back once. Finally, they reached a small room with a narrow bed and a single window. It was simple, almost bare. Clearly, they did not think much of their human guest. "You will stay here," Lyra said. "Do not leave this room without escort. Do not touch anything that is not yours. Do not speak to anyone unless spoken to first." "Thank you, Princess," Jay said. "I will try not to cause trouble." She paused at the door and turned slightly. For just a moment, something like curiosity flickered in her star-filled eyes. "Why do you bow so much?" she asked. "You know we think your species is primitive. Your bowing will not change that." Jay thought about the question. Then he smiled. "Where I come from, we bow to show respect. It does not matter if the other person respects us back. It is about who we are, not who they are." Lyra stared at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, she left. Jay sat down on the narrow bed and looked out the window at the alien sky. The stars were different here. The air smelled different. He was alone, far from home, surrounded by beings who saw him as nothing more than a curiosity. But he was still smiling. Because when Princess Lyra had looked at him, just for an instant, he had seen something behind her cold mask. Something that looked almost like interest. And Park Jae had learned long ago that interest was the first step to friendship. He did not sleep well that night. The bed was too hard, the room was too cold, and strange sounds echoed through the palace. But when morning came, he rose early, washed his face with the ice-cold water provided, and prepared himself to face another day. He was not an ambassador. He was not a diplomat. He was just a translator who had been thrown into the deep end. But he was human, and humans, as the galaxy would soon learn, were very good at swimming. The first week on Valora Prime was the hardest of Jay's life. Every morning, Princess Lyra came to his room and escorted him through the palace. She showed him the great halls, the gardens of crystal flowers, and the libraries that held knowledge from a million years of history. She explained the customs, the rules, and the many ways he could accidentally offend someone. She never smiled. She never laughed. She spoke to him like a teacher speaking to a slow student, patient but distant. Jay did not let it bother him. He asked questions. He listened carefully. He took notes in a small book he carried everywhere. And whenever he made a mistake, which happened often, he apologized sincerely and tried to do better. The Valoran nobles found him amusing. They would gather to watch him struggle with their complicated dining rituals or stumble over the longer words in their language. Some laughed openly. Others simply shook their heads and walked away. But Jay kept trying. One afternoon, he was walking through the lower halls of the palace when he saw a servant struggling to carry a heavy box. Without thinking, Jay hurried over and grabbed one end of the box. "Let me help," he said. The servant froze. He stared at Jay with wide, terrified eyes. Velerans did not touch each other casually. Physical contact was reserved for combat, for sacred ceremonies, or for immediate family and private. The idea of a stranger helping carry something by touching the same object was deeply strange to them. But Jay did not know this. He simply smiled and helped carry the box to its destination, chatting the whole way about how heavy it was and asking the servant about his day. When they set the box down, the servant bowed quickly and hurried away without a word. Jay was confused, but he shrugged and continued on his walk. He did not see Princess Lyra watching from the shadows. Her eyes narrowed in thought. The next day, she asked him about it. "Why did you help that servant?" she said as they walked through a garden of pale blue flowers. "He is beneath you in rank. It was not your duty." Jay tilted his head. "He needed help. I was there. It seemed like the right thing to do. But it was not proper. Maybe not by your customs," Jay admitted. "But where I come from, helping people is always proper. It does not matter who they are. Rich or poor, high rank or low rank, we help each other." Lyra was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Your species is very strange." Jay laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and loud, and it echoed off the crystal walls of the garden. Several Valorans nearby turned to stare in shock. Laughing in public was considered undignified, but Jay did not care. He just grinned at Lyra and said, "Yes, we probably are. But I think being strange is not always a bad thing. Something flickered in Lyra's eyes. It was gone so fast that Jay almost missed it, but he was sure he saw it. For just a moment, the corner of her mouth had twitched, almost like she wanted to smile. Days turned into weeks. Jay continued his clumsy journey through Velaran society. He made friends with the servants, who slowly grew less afraid of him. He impressed the scholars in the library with his genuine curiosity about their history. He even managed to make an old general laugh by accidentally mispronouncing a word and turning a polite greeting into a declaration of war against vegetables. And through it all, Lyra was there, watching, listening, growing more confused by this strange human who refused to act the way she expected. One evening, it rained. Velaran rain was not like Earth rain. It fell in thick, silver drops that turned to ice the moment they touched the ground. The paths became slippery and dangerous, covered in a thin layer of frost. Jay and Lyra were returning from a meeting when she stepped on a patch of hidden ice. Her foot slipped. For the first time in her life, Princess Lyra Velthani, grace itself, began to fall. Jay moved without thinking. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm, pulling her upright before she could hit the ground. The moment his skin touched hers, everything stopped. His hand was warm, so warm, it burned against her cold skin like a small sun. She could feel his pulse through his fingers, fast and strong. She could feel the life in him, hot and wild and utterly alien. She pulled away sharply. "Do not touch me," she said. Her voice was cold, but her eyes were wide. Jay stepped back immediately. "I am sorry, I did not mean to offend you. Where I come from, catching someone who is falling is just instinct. We use touch to show that we care about each other." "That is barbaric," Lyra said, but her voice was not as steady as she wanted it to be. "Maybe," Jay said softly, "but is it really so wrong? To reach out when someone needs help? To let them feel that they are not alone?" Lyra did not answer. She turned and walked away, her steps quick and sharp. Jay followed at a distance, his heart heavy. He had ruined things. He had crossed a line that he should not have crossed. That night, Lyra could not sleep. She lay in her chambers, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the warmth of his hand. She had lived for 300 years. She had been touched before, in formal ceremonies and rare family moments, but nothing had felt like that. Nothing had felt so alive. Her brother Kale visited her the next morning. He was tall and stern, a warrior of great renown. He looked at her with concern. "I have heard rumors," he said. "They say you spend too much time with the human. They say you are becoming attached." "They are wrong," Lyra said quickly. Too quickly. Kale's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, sister. Humans are short-lived. They burn bright and die fast. They are ruled by emotions that we left behind long ago. Becoming attached to one would be foolish." "I know," Lyra said. But after Kyle left, she stood by her window and looked out at the garden where she had walked with Jay. She thought about his laugh, his kindness to servants, his endless questions. She thought about his hand on her arm. And for the first time in centuries, Princess Lyra Velthani did not know what she was feeling. She told herself it was curiosity, scientific interest in a primitive species. Nothing more. But deep down in a part of herself she had long forgotten existed, she knew that was a lie. The human had done something impossible. He had made her feel warm, and she was terrified. The next day she went to find him. She told herself it was just her duty, just her job to watch the human guest. But when she saw him in the library bent over an ancient book, with a look of pure wonder on his face, something in her chest tightened. She watched him for a long time before he noticed her. When he looked up and smiled at her, that simple, honest smile, she felt the warmth again, and this time, she did not pull away. The Festival of Eternal Stars was the most important celebration in the Valoran calendar. It happened once every 50 years, marking the alignment of the 7 moons of Valora Prime. For one night, the sky would blaze with colors that had no names in human language, and the entire empire would gather to watch. Jay had never seen anything so beautiful. The palace was transformed for the occasion. Floating lanterns filled the air, casting soft silver light over everything. Music played from hidden places, Strange and haunting melodies that made Jay's heart ache with feelings he could not name. Thousands of Valorans filled the great courtyard, all dressed in flowing white robes that shimmered like starlight. Princess Lyra found him standing alone on a high balcony, watching the celebrations below. She had been looking for him, though she told herself she had just been walking by. "You should be down there," she said, coming to stand beside him. "This is a rare honor for an outsider." "I know," Jay said. He did not look at her. His eyes were fixed on the sky, where the first colors were beginning to appear. "It is wonderful, but I think I like watching from here. It is quieter." Lyra followed his gaze upward. The sky was turning shades of deep purple and burning orange, colors bleeding into each other like paint and water. For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the universe put on a show. "You have been here for 2 months," Lyra said finally. "Most outsiders grow tired of our ways. They find us cold, boring. They cannot wait to leave." "I am not tired," Jay said. "Every day I learn something new. Every day I see something amazing." He paused, then added softly, "And I have good company." Lyra felt that strange warmth again, spreading through her chest. She did not know what to say, so she said nothing. Below them, the music grew louder. The crowd began to sing, an ancient hymn that Lyra had known since childhood. Without thinking, she began to hum along. Jay turned to look at her. In the strange light of the festival, her silver-blue skin seemed to glow even brighter. Her hair fell around her shoulders like liquid moonlight. She was, he thought, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And in that moment, standing on a balcony on an alien world under a sky of impossible colors, Park Jae realized that he was falling in love. He did not say anything. He was not stupid. He knew that such feelings were impossible. She was a princess of an ancient empire. He was a human who would be dead of old age before she had finished her mourning. It could never work. But the heart does not listen to logic. The heart only knows what it feels. Lyra stopped humming and looked at him. "Why are you staring at me?" "Sorry," Jay said quickly, looking away. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am to be here." Before Lyra could respond, something happened. There was a flash of movement in the shadows behind them. 3 figures in dark cloaks emerged from the darkness, moving with deadly speed. In their hands were plasma blades, weapons that could cut through steel like paper. They were assassins, and they were coming for Lyra. Everything happened in seconds. Lyra saw them and reached for a weapon she did not have. She had not brought her blade to the festival. A foolish mistake. A deadly mistake. The lead assassin raised his weapon. His target was clear. The princess would die. Then Jay moved. He was not fast. By Valoran standards, he was painfully slow. He was not strong. A child of their species could have broken him in half. He had no weapons, no armor, no training for combat like this. But none of that mattered. Park Jae threw himself between the princess and the blade. The plasma cut across his shoulder, burning through flesh and muscle. Pain exploded through his body, worse than anything he had ever felt. But he did not stop. He could not stop. All he could think was that he had to protect her. With a scream that was half pain and half rage, Jay tackled the lead assassin. They crashed through the balcony railing and fell, tumbling through the air. Jay somehow twisted his body to land on top, using the assassin to break his fall. The impact killed the attacker instantly. Jay lay there, bleeding and broken but alive. Above him, chaos erupted. Palace guards came running. The 2 remaining assassins tried to fight, but they were outnumbered. One was cut down immediately. The other fled into the night. Lyra ran to the edge of the broken balcony and looked down. She saw Jay lying in a pool of blood, his shoulder torn open, his face pale as death. But he was looking up at her, and somehow, impossibly, he was smiling. "Are you safe?" he called up, his voice weak. Lyra could not answer. There was something blocking her throat. Something wet was building in her eyes. Valorans did not cry. They had evolved past such primitive responses long ago. But looking at this human, this foolish, reckless, wonderful human who had nearly died for her, Princess Lyra felt tears sliding down her cheeks. The guards carried Jay to the healing chambers. The royal physicians worked on him for hours, using technology that could repair almost any wound. He would live, they said, but it had been close. Very close. Lyra stayed by his side the entire time. Prince Kale came to find her. His face was dark with concern. "What are you doing, sister? The entire court is watching. They are talking about how you weep for a human, like a child weeps for a broken toy." "Let them talk," Lyra said. Her voice was steady, but there was something new in it. Something hard. "He is just a human," Cal pressed. "He means nothing." Lyra turned to face her brother. Her eyes were red from crying, but they burned with a fire that Kale had never seen before. "He threw himself in front of a blade for me," she said. "He did not think. He did not calculate. He just moved. He was willing to die for me." "That is exactly the problem," Kale said. "Humans are emotional. They do not think. They act on feelings like animals." "Is that what you call it?" Lyra asked quietly. "When someone gives their life for another? Is that just being an animal?" Kale had no answer. Lyra turned back to watch the sleeping human. His chest rose and fell slowly, and even unconscious, his face held a kind of peace. "We live for thousands of years," she said, more to herself than to Kale. "We calculate, we plan, we survive. But have we ever truly lived? Have we ever felt something strongly enough to risk everything for it?" "That is a dangerous way of thinking," Kale warned. "Maybe," Lyra said, "but for the first time in 300 years, I feel alive." Kale left without another word. He did not understand. Perhaps he never would, but Lyra understood. Looking at Jay's sleeping face, she finally understood what she had been feeling all this time. It was not curiosity. It was not scientific interest. It was love. Terrifying, impossible, wonderful love. And she had no idea what to do about it. Jay woke to a world of soft light and gentle warmth. For a moment he thought he was back on Earth, in his small apartment, with sunlight coming through the window. But then he remembered the festival, the assassins, the burning pain in his shoulder, falling through the air. He tried to sit up and gasped as his body protested. Everything hurt. His shoulder was wrapped in strange, glowing bandages that hummed with quiet energy. His left arm was strapped to his chest. He felt weak, like all his strength had drained away. "Do not move." The voice was soft and close. Jay turned his head and saw Princess Lyra sitting beside his bed. She looked exhausted. Her perfect silver hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled. She had not moved from that spot in 3 days. "Princess," Jay croaked. His throat was dry as sand. "You should not be here. People will talk." "People are already talking," Lyra said. She poured water from a crystal pitcher and held it to his lips. "Drink." Jay drank. The water was cool and sweet, and he felt a little stronger with each sip. When he finished, he lay back and looked at the ceiling. "What happened to the assassins?" he asked. "2 are dead. 1 escaped. The investigation continues." Lyra paused. "You killed one of them, when you fell from the balcony." "I remember," Jay said quietly. He did not feel proud. He felt tired. He had never killed anyone before. "Why did you do it?" Lyra asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes searched his face with desperate intensity. "Why did you protect me? You could have run. You could have called for guards. You could have done anything except throw yourself in front of a blade." Jay thought about the question. It deserved an honest answer. "I did not think about it," he said finally. "I saw the blade coming for you, and something inside me just moved. I could not let them hurt you, not while I was standing there, not while there was anything I could do to stop it." "But why?" Lyra pressed. "You barely know me. I have not been kind to you. I have treated you like a nuisance, like a burden I was forced to carry. Why would you risk your life for me?" Jay looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the confusion in her eyes, the fear, the desperate need to understand, and he realized that she truly did not know. In her long, cold life, no one had ever done something like this for her. She had no way to process it. "Because you matter to me," he said simply. "I care about you, Lyra. I do not know when it started. I do not know why. But somewhere along the way, watching you, talking with you, learning from you, I started to care. And when I saw those blades, the only thing I could think was that I could not let them take you from the world. Lyra stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no words. Jay smiled weakly. I know it is stupid. I know we are too different. I know I am just a human who will be dead in a few decades while you live for another 10,000 years. But feelings do not care about logic. They just are. Before Lyra could respond, the door opened. A guard entered and bowed deeply. Princess, your father has summoned the human to the throne of eternity. He is to present himself immediately. Lyra stood. He is still recovering. He cannot even walk. The Emperor was clear, the guard said. Immediately. Jay pushed himself up, ignoring the pain that screamed through his body. I will go, he said. Help me stand. It took both Lyra and the guard to get him on his feet. He swayed and the world spun around him, but he forced himself to stay upright. He would not be carried into the Emperor's chamber like a sack of grain. He would walk, even if it killed him. The journey to the throne of eternity felt endless. Every step was agony. But Jay kept going, leaning on Lyra more than he wanted to admit. She did not complain. She did not pull away. When they finally entered the great chamber, Jay saw that it was full. Every noble house was represented. Hundreds of Valoran eyes stared at him, cold and judging. Near the throne, Prince Kael stood with his hand on his sword, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Emperor Velkaran sat upon the throne of eternity, ancient and still as a mountain, his star-filled eyes fixed on Jay with terrible weight. Human, the Emperor said. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. You have created a great disturbance in my court. Jay bowed as deeply as his wounded body would allow. I apologize, Your Majesty. It was not my intention. Your intentions matter little, the Emperor continued. What matters is what has happened. My daughter, Princess Lyra of House Velthani, has neglected her duties for 3 days to sit at your bedside. She has wept in public, something that has not happened in this court for 5,000 years. She has defended you against her own brother. The entire empire is whispering about the princess and her human pet. Pet? The word stung, but Jay did not react. He kept his head bowed. What do you intend to do about this? The Emperor asked. How will you restore balance? Jay lifted his head. He looked at the Emperor, then at the court, then at Lyra. She stood frozen among her family, her silver eyes wide with fear. But it was not fear of her father. It was fear of what Jay might say, fear of what he might not say. In that moment, Park Jay made a decision that would change history. Your Majesty, he said, his voice clear and steady despite his pain, I have no way to restore the balance you speak of, because I am about to make it worse. A gasp ran through the chamber. Prince Kael's hand tightened on his sword. Jay took a deep breath. I am Park Jay, a simple translator from a planet you consider primitive. I have no wealth, no power, no long life to offer. I am nothing compared to the people in this room. He turned to look directly at Lyra. But I love your daughter. I love her courage and her curiosity. I love the way she pretends to be cold when I can see the fire inside her. I love that she stayed by my side for 3 days, even knowing what people would say. I love her in a way that I cannot explain and cannot control. The chamber was dead silent. Even the Emperor seemed frozen. And so, Jay continued, I am asking, with all humility and full knowledge of how insane it sounds, for permission to marry her. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Prince Kael drew his sword and stepped forward. I will cut out your tongue for such an insult. Kael, stop! Lyra shouted. It was the first time anyone had heard her raise her voice in public. The Emperor raised one hand and Kael froze in place. Slowly, the ancient ruler turned his gaze to his daughter. Lyra, he said, do you have anything to say? This was the moment, the turning point. Everything depended on what happened next. Lyra looked at Jay. She saw the blood seeping through his bandages from the effort of standing. She saw the sweat on his pale face. She saw the fear in his eyes, but also the determination. This foolish, brave, wonderful human had just risked everything for her. And she knew what she had to do. She stepped forward, past her brother, past her shocked family, until she stood before Jay. The entire court held its breath. She reached out and took his hand, publicly, deliberately, in front of everyone. Yes, she said. One word, one simple word, and Jay's entire world changed. The silence that followed Lyra's answer was the loudest thing Jay had ever heard. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. The nobles stared with mouths hanging open. The guards looked at each other in confusion. Prince Kale stood frozen with his sword half raised, unable to process what his sister had just done. Then chaos erupted. Half the court started shouting at once. Some screamed that this was an outrage. Others demanded that the human be executed immediately. One elderly duchess actually fainted and had to be caught by her servants. The noise was overwhelming, a wave of angry voices crashing against the walls of the chamber. But Lyra did not look at any of them. She kept her eyes on Jay and her hand remained firmly in his. "You are a fool," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "I know," Jay replied. He was smiling even though tears were running down his face. "But I am your fool if you will have me." Before she could answer, Emperor Velkaran's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. "Silence." The word echoed with ancient power, and instantly every voice stopped. The emperor rose from his throne, something he rarely did, and the entire court stepped back in awe. He walked down the steps slowly, his white robes flowing behind him, until he stood before his daughter and the human. "Lyra," he said, "do you understand what you have done? You have publicly declared your intent to bond with an outsider, a human, a creature whose entire lifetime is less than a single century. You have broken traditions that have stood for 10,000 years." "I understand, Father," Lyra said. Her voice did not waver. "And you still say yes?" Lyra looked at Jay again. She saw his wounds, his weakness, his mortality. She saw all the reasons why this was a terrible idea. But she also saw his eyes full of love and hope and fear and courage all mixed together in a way that Valorans had forgotten was possible. "Yes," she repeated. "I say yes." The Emperor studied them both for a long moment. His ancient face was impossible to read. Then slowly he turned to address the court. "In the history of the Valoran Empire," he said, "there have been many laws, many traditions, many things that we believed were eternal and unchangeable. But the universe is vast and full of surprises. Perhaps it is time for us to learn that even the eternal can change." Gasps echoed through the chamber. "I do not approve of this union," the Emperor continued. "It goes against everything our ancestors taught us. But my daughter has chosen, publicly and freely, to give her heart to this human, and I will not dishonor her choice by ignoring it." He turned back to Jay. "You, human, you have shown courage that surprised me. You protected my daughter when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. For that, I respect you. But respect is not enough to allow this." Jay's heart sank. He had dared to hope, but now that hope was dying. "There will be a trial," the Emperor said. "You will have 3 months to prove that you are worthy of my daughter. You will face challenges designed to test your body, your mind, and your spirit. If you pass, the union will be allowed. If you fail, you will leave this world and never return." "And if I refuse," Jay asked. "Then you die here and now," the Emperor said simply. Jay felt Lyra's hand tighten around his. He looked at her and saw the fear in her eyes. She did not want him to do this. She knew the challenges would be designed for Valoran physiology. A human had no chance. But he also saw something else. Hope. Desperate, fragile hope that maybe somehow he could succeed. "I accept," Jay said. The Emperor nodded. "Then it is decided. The trials will begin in 1 week when you have recovered from your wounds. Until then, you will remain in the palace as a guest, not a prisoner. My daughter may visit you, but there will be no further public displays of affection. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Jay and Lyra said together. The Emperor returned to his throne. "This audience is over. Everyone leave. Now." The nobles fled the chamber like frightened animals, eager to escape the Emperor's presence and begin spreading gossip. Within moments, the great hall was empty except for Jay, Lyra, the Emperor, and Prince Kale, who had not moved from his spot. "Father," Kyle said. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "You cannot allow this. It is madness. She is a princess of the blood. He is an animal." Kyle, the Emperor said tiredly, I have made my decision. You will accept it. I will not, Kyle snapped. If the court will not stop this disgrace, I will. I challenge the human to a duel of honor. By ancient law, he cannot refuse. Lyra stepped forward. Kale, no. But it was too late. The challenge had been spoken. By tradition, it could not be withdrawn. Jay felt the blood drain from his face. He could barely stand. His shoulder was still healing. And Kale was a warrior who had trained for centuries. There was no possible way to win, but there was also no way to refuse. I accept, Jay said quietly. Kyle smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. The duel will take place in 2 days. You may choose any weapon you like. Not that it will matter. With that, he turned and walked out of the chamber. Lyra turned to her father. You have to stop this. He will kill Jay. I cannot stop it, the Emperor said. The challenge was made according to tradition. My hands are bound. He paused, then added softly, but perhaps there is more to this human than meets the eye. He has surprised us before. Perhaps he will surprise us again. He left the chamber, and Jay and Lyra were alone. She turned to him, and for the first time he saw real fear on her face, not the cold mask she wore in public. Real, raw, human fear. Why? She whispered. Why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep risking everything? Jay reached up and touched her face. His hand was warm against her cool skin. Because you are worth it, he said. Because for the first time in my life, I have found something worth fighting for. Worth dying for. I am not brave, Lyra. I am terrified. But I would rather die trying to be with you than live a safe life without you. Tears ran down Lyra's silver cheeks. She pulled him close and held him, not caring who might see. You are going to die, she whispered into his shoulder. My brother will not show mercy. Maybe, Jay admitted, but I have 2 days, and humans are very good at finding ways to survive. He pulled back and smiled at her, that same warm, honest smile that had captured her heart all those weeks ago. Trust me, he said, I have a plan. He did not have a plan. He had no idea what to do, but he could not let her see his fear. She needed to believe in him, even if he could not believe in himself. As the sun set on Valora Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Park Jae held the woman he loved and tried not to think about the death that waited for him. 2 days. He had 2 days to find a miracle. He hoped that was enough time. The night before the duel, Jay could not sleep. He lay in his small room, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had brought him to this moment. 2 months ago, he had been a simple translator, living a simple life. Now he was about to fight a centuries-old warrior prince for the right to marry an alien princess. The universe had a strange sense of humor. A knock came at his door. Jay sat up carefully, his shoulder still aching, and called out, "Come in." The door opened, and an old Valoran servant entered. It was the same one Jay had helped carry the box weeks ago. The servant bowed deeply and presented a small package. "For you, sir," the servant said, "from those of us who have watched, those of us who believe." Jay opened the package. Inside was a small crystal pendant, shaped like a star. It was simple, probably worth nothing by Valoran standards, but it meant everything to Jay. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The servant bowed again. "Good luck tomorrow, sir. We will be watching and hoping." After the servant left, Jay held the pendant in his hand and thought about what it represented. The servants, the common people. They were watching him too. They saw something in this foolish human that gave them hope. He could not let them down. But how could he possibly win? Kel was faster, stronger, and more skilled than Jay could ever be. In a straight fight, Jay had no chance. His only option was to somehow change the rules of the game. And suddenly he had an idea. The morning of the duel arrived cold and gray. Snow fell from the sky in silver flakes, covering the dueling ground in a thin white blanket. The entire court had gathered to watch. Even the Emperor sat on a raised platform, his ancient face revealing nothing. Lyra stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She had tried to convince Jay to run, to forfeit, to do anything other than face her brother, but he had refused. "If I run," he had said, I am just another coward who abandoned you. I will not be that man." So now she watched as the two combatants entered the ring. Kel wore light armor and carried a plasma blade, the same kind of weapon the assassins had used. Its edge hummed with deadly energy. Jay wore no armor. He carried a simple wooden staff he had requested from the palace training grounds. Nothing else. The crowd murmured in confusion. A staff? Against a plasma blade? The human truly was insane. Kyle laughed openly. "Is this a joke? You insult me with this weapon? I expected you to at least try to fight." "I do not intend to fight," Jay said calmly. More confusion. Even the Emperor leaned forward slightly. "If you will not fight, then you will die," Kyle said, raising his blade. "Before you kill me," Jay said, "answer one question. Why do you hate me so much? Is it really because I am human? Or is it because your sister loves me more than she has ever loved you?" The words hit Kale like a physical blow. His face twisted with rage. "You know nothing about my sister," he snarled. "I know that she stayed by my bed for 3 days," Jay said. "I know that she cried for me in front of the entire court. I know that she chose me, a weak, short-lived human, over everything she was taught to value. That must hurt, to know that a stranger earned her heart when her own brother never could." "Silence!" Kyle charged forward, his blade aimed at Jay's heart. Jay did not move to block. He did not move to dodge. He simply stood there, staff lowered, and spoke. "Kill me if you must, but ask yourself this. Will it make her happy? Will it restore your family's honor? Or will it only prove that Valorans destroy what they do not understand?" Cal's blade stopped an inch from Jay's chest. The prince was breathing hard, his entire body shaking with rage and something else. Something like doubt. "She will never forgive you," Jay continued softly. "If you kill me, you will lose her forever. Not to death, but to hatred. Is that what you want? Is that the brother you want to be?" The silence stretched for an eternity. Every eye in the courtyard was fixed on the two figures. Kale's hand trembled on his blade. His star-filled eyes burned with conflicting emotions. Then slowly he lowered his weapon. "I cannot," he whispered. "I cannot do it." Jay let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. His legs were shaking so badly he could barely stand. "You are weak," Kyle said. "You are mortal. You will die and leave my sister alone with nothing but memories. You will break her heart." "Maybe," Jay admitted, "but every moment I have with her will be filled with love. Every second will matter. Is that not better than thousands of years of cold loneliness?" Kyle stared at him for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the falling snow. The crowd erupted in noise. Some cheered. Some screamed in outrage. The Emperor raised his hand for silence, and gradually the chaos subsided. "The human did not win through combat," the Emperor announced, "but he did not lose either. The duel is concluded without death. By tradition, this means the challenge is resolved." He stood and looked at Jay with something that might have been respect. "You have passed the first test, human. You have shown that courage is not just about fighting. It is also about understanding when not to fight. It is about touching the heart of your enemy and changing it." He turned to address the court. "This union will be permitted, not as a traditional Valoran marriage, but as something new, a bridge between our peoples, a testament that even those who have lived for eternity can still learn from those who live briefly but love fiercely." Lyra broke through the crowd and ran to Jay. She threw her arms around him, no longer caring about tradition or propriety. She held him so tightly he could barely breathe. "You fool," she whispered. "You absolute fool. I thought you were going to die." "So did I," Jay admitted. "But I figured if I was going to die anyway, I might as well try something different." Lyra pulled back and looked at him with wonder. "You talked to him. You talked my brother out of killing you. No one has ever done that. No one has ever been able to reach him." "Humans are very good at talking," Jay said with a weak smile. "It is one of our few talents." Lyra laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and free, and it was the most beautiful sound Jay had ever heard. Around them, the snow continued to fall. The court watched in amazement as the alien princess and the human translator held each other, laughing and crying, and not caring who saw. History was being made, and it was only the beginning. The wedding of Park Jae and Princess Lyra Velthani was broadcast across 400 worlds. In the 3 months leading up to the ceremony, Jae had completed his trials. They had been difficult beyond measure. He had climbed frozen mountains with nothing but his bare hands. He had solved riddles designed by the greatest Valoran scholars. He had endured pain, isolation, and challenges that would have broken most beings. But he had not broken. Each time he fell, he got back up. Each time he failed, he tried again. The Valorans watching him slowly change from mockery to confusion to something that looked almost like admiration. Humans were not supposed to be able to do these things. They were weak, short-lived, primitive. And yet here was this one human who refused to give up. No matter how many times he was knocked down, no matter how impossible the odds seemed, he kept fighting. He kept hoping. By the end of the trials, even Prince Kale had stopped protesting. He still did not approve of the union, but he had stopped fighting against it. Something in him had changed that day in the snow, when Jae had shown him a different kind of strength. Now, on the day of the wedding, the entire galaxy watched. The ceremony was held in the crystal gardens of Valora Prime, a place of impossible beauty where flowers made of living light bloomed in colors that had no names. 2 suns hung in the sky, one golden and one silver, casting double shadows across the assembled guests. Thousands of Valorans filled the gardens, but they were not alone. For the first time in history, humans stood among them. Jae's family had come from Earth, including his elderly grandmother, who had traveled 3 months just to see her grandson marry a princess. And beside the Valorans and humans stood representatives from dozens of other species. Tall, slender beings with wings like stained glass. Small, round creatures that rolled instead of walked. Ancient beings of pure energy that glowed with inner light. They had all come to witness something that had never happened before. The music began, strange and beautiful melodies from instruments that no human had ever seen. The crowd fell silent as Princess Lyra appeared at the entrance to the gardens. She was dressed in flowing white robes that shimmered with inner light. Her silver blue hair floated around her like a cloud of starlight. Her eyes, those beautiful eyes that held captured stars, were fixed on the man waiting for her at the altar. Jae stood there in his own white robes, simple compared to hers but no less elegant. He was still shorter than her, still mortal, still human in every way. But when he smiled at her, she thought he was the most beautiful being in the universe. They met at the altar, where the emperor himself waited to perform the ceremony. The ancient ruler looked at them both, his face unreadable. "We are gathered here," he said, his voice echoing across the gardens, "to witness something unprecedented, a union between stars and fire, between eternity and a single moment, between those who have forgotten how to love and one who has reminded us what love means." He turned to Jae. "Park Jae of Earth, do you take this woman to be your partner, knowing that your time together will be brief? Knowing that you will age while she remains unchanged? Knowing that you will leave her alone with only memories?" Jae looked at Lyra. He thought about everything they had been through. The cold first meetings, the slow warming, the blade he had thrown himself before, the trials he had endured. All of it had led to this moment. "I do," he said. "I take her for whatever time I have. Every second will be a gift. Every moment will be treasured. And when I am gone, my love for her will echo through eternity." The emperor nodded and turned to Lyra. "Lyra of House Velthani, do you take this man, knowing all that you know, knowing the pain that awaits you, knowing that your heart will break when his time ends?" Lyra reached out and took Jae's hands. His warmth spread through her, that impossible human warmth that had first caught her attention all those months ago. "I do," she said. "I take him for every moment we have. I will hold him when he grows old. I will be there when his time ends. And I will carry his memory with me for the rest of eternity, because a single moment of genuine love is worth more than 1,000 years of cold survival." The emperor was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, something extraordinary happened. He smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was there. For the first time in perhaps 1,000 years, Emperor Velkaron smiled. "Then by the power vested in me as Emperor of the Valoran people," he said, "I declare you bound, not as Valorans, not as humans, but as something new, something better. A bridge between our peoples, built on the most human of foundations, love." Jay pulled Lyra close and kissed her, in front of the court, in front of the Emperor, in front of 400 worlds watching through broadcast screens. He kissed her with all the passion and joy and fear and hope that burned inside him, and she kissed him back. The crowd erupted in cheers. Humans laughed and cried and hugged each other. Valorans watched in amazement, some confused, some moved, some feeling emotions they had thought lost forever. Other species added their own sounds of celebration. As Jay and Lyra broke their kiss, still holding each other, Jay whispered, "Are you sure about this? I am going to grow old. I am going to die long before you." Lyra touched his face, tracing the lines that would one day become wrinkles. "Then I will carry you with me, for the rest of eternity." That is what your kind has taught mine, Park Jay, that even the briefest light can burn bright enough to be remembered forever. Around them, the celebration continued. Music played. People danced. Two civilizations began the long process of learning to understand each other. But Jay noticed none of it. He only saw Lyra, his wife, his partner, his impossible dream come true. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed. Humans and Valorans began to work together, combining eternal wisdom with passionate drive. Other species joined them, drawn by the example of what love could accomplish. Trade agreements became friendships. Friendships became alliances. Alliances became something like family. And at the center of it all were Jay and Lyra, living proof that differences did not have to divide, that the strange and the familiar could find common ground, that even the coldest heart could be warmed by genuine love. Jay lived for another 60 years. He grew old as humans do, while Lyra remained unchanged. He moved slower, spoke softer, needed more rest, but his eyes never lost their warmth. His smile never faded. When his time finally came, Lyra was there. She held his hand as he took his last breath. And she whispered that she would love him until the stars themselves grew cold. She kept that promise. For the next 10,000 years, Princess Lyra Velthani told the story of her human husband to anyone who would listen. She spoke of his courage, his kindness, his stubborn refusal to accept what everyone said was impossible. She spoke of how he had taught an entire civilization that love was not weakness, that emotions were not primitive, that the shortest life, lived with passion and purpose, was worth more than an eternity of cold survival. And every time she told the story, beings of all species listened with wonder, because in the end, that was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology, not resources, not military strength, but the simple, powerful, world-changing ability to love without limit, to reach out across the darkness and say, "You are not alone," to prove that even the stars could be moved by a single human heart.